All right, welcome in everybody to the deep dive. We're taking a look at, well, a pretty tough situation, the Libyan dinar and the crisis it's facing.
Yeah.
We've got a lot to go through. Reports from the Central Bank of Libya,
Yeah.
analyses from the Government of National Unity, and then some insights from Husni Bey, who's a prominent Libyan businessman.
Okay.
We've also pulled some historical data on the dinar's value and, of course, recommendations from the usual suspects, the IMF and the World Bank. So lots to unpack. I guess our goal today really is to understand why this dinar is tanking the way it is, and what can realistically be done
Right.
to actually try to stabilize it,
Right.
for the average person living in Libya, trying to use it day to day.
Yeah. I mean, the Libyan people are really feeling this.
Yeah.
This is a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do we even start? What's at the core of this problem?
So, I mean, it's kind of a perfect storm in a way. You've got multiple issues kind of all hitting the dinar at the same time, and they're all sort of tied together. So it's a pretty complex picture.
Yeah.
But we can try to break it down.
All right, so let's start with what sounds like the biggest storm cloud: government spending.
Okay.
I was reading that these rival administrations spent something like 224 billion dinars in 2024.
Yeah, that's a massive amount.
How does that kind of spending, how does that directly impact the dinar's value?
So think of it like this. When you increase the amount of money in circulation, right?
Right.
Without a corresponding increase in the amount of goods and services that are available, each individual dinar becomes worth less.
Right.
You just have more money chasing the same amount of stuff. And that drives up prices, which is what we call inflation.
Well, right.
And, this is something that the Government of National Unity, the GNA, is really pointing to. They highlight the Eastern government spending. They're saying, look, they're spending about 59 billion dinars sort of in parallel.
Wow.
And that's on top of the overall increase in the money supply. Okay.
Which has gone up to like 178.1 billion dinars.
So you're saying it's too much money chasing too few goods.
Exactly.
Okay. And then on top of that, we've got to factor in that Libya's oil revenue, right?
Yeah.
Which is their main source of foreign currency. It's been pretty weak.
That's right.
Only, what was it, like $18.6 billion in 2024?
Yeah. And if you compare that to the $27 billion they spend in foreign currency, that's a really big gap.
Yeah.
And this is where Husni Bey comes in. He makes a really interesting point about how Libya's economy is basically dollarized, right?
Okay.
Because oil makes up something like 93% of the government spending.
Wow.
So when oil revenue drops, the central bank has less ability to prop up the dinar, against the dollar.
Yeah.
And they end up having to use their foreign currency reserves.
Right.
Which is, not sustainable. They can't do that forever.
Yeah, it sounds pretty dire. And then, of course, we've got to add in the whole political dimension, right?
You have two separate governments basically operating in Tripoli and Benghazi. And that has to make things incredibly complicated when you're trying to have some kind of unified economic policy.
Absolutely. I mean, when you have different groups with conflicting priorities and different spending habits, it makes it incredibly difficult for the central bank to try and implement effective policies.
Yeah.
And it often leads to, sort of reactive measures like devaluations instead of, a more strategic approach.
Yeah.
Because they're just trying to, put out fires as they come up.
Okay.
Instead of, having a long-term plan.
Right. And it's not just the official channels we're talking about either, right?
Yeah.
There's also this whole sort of shadow economy with smuggling and the impact of illegal immigration on the dinar's value.
That's absolutely right. I mean, smuggling, goods and fuel, that drains a lot of foreign currency from the country. And the impact of illegal immigration is huge, too. They estimate that it costs Libya something like $7 billion every year, just in terms of foreign currency demand, people coming in, consuming goods and services.
Wow.
And then on top of that, you have this whole black market that's thriving on the difference between the official and the unofficial exchange rates for the dinar.
Yeah.
So it just adds another layer of instability to the whole thing. It's a mess.
Let's pull back a little bit and look at this from a broader perspective.
Okay.
What other economic factors are at play here that are impacting the dinar?
So, I mean, Husni Bey again talks about how, the dinar's weak purchasing power is just fueling this cycle of inflation. And the IMF is also pointing to the, global energy price fluctuations and how those affect Libya. And historically, if you look at the research, the dinar's value has always been pretty closely linked to inflation, trade, economic growth, and, no surprise, oil prices.
Okay, so all of these things are interconnected, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Now let's talk about what the central bank has been trying to do. They devalued the dinar pretty recently by 13.3% in April 2025.
Yeah.
So what's the thinking behind that? What are they trying to achieve with these devaluations?
So essentially what devaluation does is it makes the dinar officially worth less compared to other currencies, right?
Okay.
And the idea is that this can make Libya's exports cheaper on the international market.
I see.
And their imports more expensive. And sometimes this can help correct trade imbalances.
Right.
But the downside is that it also can lead to higher prices for imported goods, which, again, fuels inflation.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, you know?
Right.
And this latest move actually follows a bigger devaluation that happened back in January 2021.
Okay, so this isn't a new tactic for them.
Right.
To get some historical context here, before this current crisis, in late 2024, the official exchange rate was around 4.48 dinars to the dollar.
Yeah.
But then you had this unofficial rate, the black market rate, that was much higher, like 7.2.
Right.
And then if we rewind even further, before the 2011 revolution, the dinar was trading at something like 1.24, 1.30 to the dollar.
Right.
And then way, way back in the 60s, the Libyan pound, which was the currency before the dinar, was actually stronger than the dollar.
Yeah.
I mean, that's quite a difference.
Yeah, it really shows how much Libya's economy has changed over the years, and a lot of it is tied to, political stability and, of course, the ups and downs of the oil market.
Yeah. So, I mean, what are we looking at here? I mean, what are some of the main solutions proposals that are on the table to get this dinar back on track?
Well, I think the recurring themes you see coming up are these ideas of fiscal discipline, right? So really having a unified budget to get that spending under control and stop all this parallel spending that's going on.
Yep.
And then reforming monetary policy, giving the central bank more independence, more tools to work with.
Okay.
And, obviously cracking down on all the smuggling and the black market activities. That's critical. And, long term, they're talking about the need to diversify the economy, move away from that dependence on oil, and, of course, managing the exchange rate effectively and, just improving overall governance and transparency.
Yeah. I mean, we've heard from all sides, right?
Yes.
The central bank, they're blaming the spending. You've got the GNA pointing fingers at the East. You've got Husni Bey really pushing for budget unity and cuts in spending. But it sounds like at least everyone agrees on the core problems in broad strokes.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, there's a striking amount of consensus on the need for these fundamental reforms, even if the emphasis on the specific causes of the crisis varies a bit depending on who you talk to. But, when you have someone like the former central bank governor, Tahir Jaime, he's actually quite pessimistic. And he's someone who's been in the thick of it.
Yeah.
So his view really underscores just how deep-seated these problems are.
Okay, so we've talked about the problems, we've talked about the proposed solutions, but it sounds like there are some pretty big obstacles here, right? I mean, I keep coming back to the political instability.
Yeah.
That feels like the biggest hurdle to overcome.
Absolutely. I mean, as long as you have these ongoing divisions, the influence of these armed groups, the corruption, weak institutions, over-reliance on oil, it makes it incredibly difficult. I mean, any economic fixes are going to be temporary at best unless you address those underlying issues. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg.
Okay, so if we're thinking long term, big picture, what's the vision here for Libya to really get back on its feet?
So it starts with political stability.
Okay.
I mean, that's the foundation for everything else, achieving lasting political stability and national unity.
Okay.
Then you can start talking about diversifying the economy, investing in other sectors like renewable energy, agriculture, tourism, manufacturing, strengthening institutions, really tackling corruption, making sure you have a strong rule of law. And then, of course, reforming the subsidy system, developing the private sector, investing in education, healthcare, really, really building up the human capital.
Okay.
But, none of that is possible without that that political foundation that has to be in place.
And the political situation, the security situation, I mean, that's got such a direct impact on all of this.
Yeah, it's fundamental. I mean, whenever there's conflict, it disrupts oil production and makes it hard to implement, any kind of coherent economic policy because you have these divided institutions.
Right.
And all the security challenges just create this uncertainty that makes it really hard to, plan for the future.
Yeah. So to bring this all together for everyone, you know, we've got this dinar in trouble.
Yeah.
And it's because of this out of control spending, this shaky oil revenue situation.
Right.
And of course, all this political infighting and the damage that these illegal activities are doing.
Right.
And the path forward, I mean, it seems pretty clear, right? It's about getting a handle on that spending, fixing the way monetary policy works, tackling these illegal markets,
right,
building a more diverse economy,
and
being smart about how they manage the exchange rate.
Exactly.
But it all comes back to what you were saying before, right? I mean, if we step back from all the details, it's clear that you can't have a stable economy, a strong dinar, without a stable political environment.
They're completely interconnected.
Yeah.
One depends on the other.
That's the big takeaway, right?
Yeah, that's it.
So for everyone listening, I mean, considering how deeply these things are connected, the political stability and the economic well-being of Libya, I mean, what do you think? What do you think is the most crucial first step that international actors should prioritize if they want to help this country achieve a unified and economically sound future? That's something to think about. That's your deep dive thought for today.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, everyone.